The American Civil War was a war of many firsts. The first battle between ironclad ships, the first submarine to sink a ship in combat, rifled cannons being used in siege warfare, advancements in moving troops on railways, telegraphs. Today, we're visiting the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, which was the first state to secede from the Union on December 20th, 1860. And we're going to visit a place where the first shots were fired to kick off the American Civil War. And we're going to hop on this ferry behind us here, take a 30-minute ferry ride, and we're going to visit Fort Sumter. So if you're ever visiting Fort Sumter, just wanted to kind of give you a little layout here. So this is obviously the visitor center, and they have a small museum up there. And if you buy your tickets, which is encouraged ahead of time for the ferry, it is right back there, just past those steps.
The current fortification on Chutes Folly Island was built in 1809 to 1810. However, it played no active role until 1860. In December of that year, it was virtually undefended. But when Union Major Robert Anderson moved his garrison from Fort Moultrie across the channel to Fort Sumter, this was viewed by many South Carolinians as an act of war. In retaliation, on the next day, December 27, 1860, approximately 150 South Carolina militia captured Castle Pinckney without incident. Maintained throughout the war, it played a minor role in the defenses of Charleston Harbor. It briefly served as a prison for Union soldiers captured at Manassas in 1861.
So we're here at Fort Sumter on the parade, and we only got about an hour, which is plenty of time if you're just exploring. Filming's going to be a little tough, but we'll make it work. But yeah, here we are, Fort Sumter. It's where the first shots of the American Civil War were fired, or so we think. So we just made our way through the Sally Port, and we're on what is commonly called the parade, which is the center of the fort. Now this structure here is actually Battery Isaac Huger, and that was constructed in 1898 to kind of update these coastal fortifications. So this wasn't part of the original Fort Sumter, as you can see. So here is remnants of where the powder magazine was, and this wall here, this is called the Gorge Wall. So this was a actually lightly fortified wall. The strongest fortifications were facing the sea, which is this way, and the weaker parts of the fortifications were facing inland. Unbeknownst to the creators of the fort, most of the fire would come from the inland fortifications during the Confederate bombardment. I believe it was a 36-hour bombardment, but this wall was destroyed relatively quick. So a little closer look, here's the Gorge Wall here, and apparently you had some kitchens, parlors, and your storerooms and magazines this way. And just a closer look at the powder magazine here. This is saying that the walls here were 5 feet thick to help keep the powder dry and of course safe from sparks and flames. Pretty neat. And again, this is what's left of the powder magazine. You can see Mother Nature has taken a toll on the fort here. Here's some shoring to help keep up the wall. So the Confederates would obviously take control of Fort Sumter when the Union would surrender, But that didn't stop the Union from trying to take it back. So from 1863 to 1865, the Union soldiers would be shelling this area, and Confederate soldiers braved a night and day pounding from Union cannons. The Union guns reduced most of Fort Sumter to rubble, but the Confederate garrison refused to surrender. And you kind of see the ruins of the fort here. And this one is Confederates posed on the terraplane of the Gorge, April 15, 1861, unaware of the long years of war and the terrible siege that lay ahead. So that looks like just after they took control of Fort Sumter. This has got to be one of the biggest cannons that I've ever seen, and let's learn a little bit more about it here. I just wanted to show you the difference between a rifled cannon barrel and a smoothbore cannon barrel. Obviously the rifling has those grooves, which would in turn spin the shell, which would make it far more deadly, accurate, and give it a longer range. And you have your smoothbore round shot here that would kind of bounce around the barrel and launch, making it a little more inaccurate. And here's your siege mortar. And what's different between a mortar and a normal cannon is a mortar would fire pretty much straight up into the air, and that shell would fall, in theory, down on top of the target. So this behemoth here is a 15-inch Rodman gun, and it had a maximum range of 5,579 yards. Could you imagine? Now these guns weren't here during the Civil War. These two Rodmans were brought to Fort Sumter as part of the 1870s modernization program. And here is an 8-inch Columbiad. When the Confederates opened fire on April 1861, several 8-inch Columbiads were mounted in Fort Sumter. This weapon probably has remained here since then, weathering the Union bombardment of 1863 and the cleanup of the 1870s. That is pretty interesting. These cannons are quite common, especially with the third system fortifications. And again, here is the Rodman gun. This thing is absolutely massive. Could you imagine a shell coming out of here? So right here, a close look at the wall in front of you reveals Union artillery shells embedded in the brick. They were fired during one of the longest sieges in U.S. military history. Batteries on Morris Island, about a mile behind you, and guns on Union warships shelled this Confederate stronghold for 22 months. Absolutely insane. The bullet-shaped shells embedded here were fired from powerful rifle cannons. And this is just what the wall here in front of us looked like after the bombardment in 1863. Now something to remember is Fort Sumter, I believe, had a few more levels on it, so I believe the walls are about 50 feet high. These ones before us here are probably about half that. And I believe that there is one of the shells. Unbelievable. It says there's a few more, but I'm having trouble finding them. You can just see some of the damage here. There's another spot here. Again, those shells were coming from that way. Now, something that I just found that was interesting, that one of the park rangers here mentioned, is you can see the red line on the flagpole. Well, that is the height of the original walls of Fort Sumter. And I believe he said that's about 50 feet in the air. So, again, you can kind of look around and see, and just imagine walls scaling that much farther up. It makes this engineering feat just that much more impressive. That's pretty cool to know. So just giving you a quick layout of the land here. That is the Atlantic Ocean and beyond. Now over here, hard to see, but that's Sullivan's Island, and that's where Fort Moultrie was. And Confederates also had a floating battery in this general area. Castle Pinckney is that way. And James Island is this way. So the Confederates had batteries pretty much all around Fort Sumter. So Fort Moultrie was a U.S. installation, and once the state of South Carolina seceded from the Union on December 20th, 1860, the commander of Fort Moultrie, who was Major Robert Anderson, now he'd relocate his forces here to Fort Sumter, without orders, I may add. And well, come January of 1861, the soldiers here were in need of resupply. So the Union Navy, coming from this direction, the Atlantic Ocean, attempted to resupply Fort Sumter. Well, Confederate batteries all along Sullivan's Island here would open up on the Union Navy, again, January of 1861. And although there were no casualties and no ships were hit, the cannon fire from the Confederate batteries thwarted the Union supply efforts here. So technically, the first shots of the American Civil War were kind of in January. And here's just an 8-inch Parrott gun. Usually Parrott guns are identifiable by this large iron ring reinforcing the breech of the cannon. That's pretty cool. Again, this range, 8,000 yards. Again, just massive firepower here. So, on Friday, April 12th, 1861, at approximately 4:30 a.m., Lieutenant Henry S. Farley, commanding a battery of 2 10-inch siege mortars on James Island, would fire the first shots at Fort Sumter. And James Island, again, is just before us. That would start the beginning of a 34-hour bombardment. Again, 34 straight hours. Now, no attempt was made to return fire by the Union cannons here for almost 2 hours. And in all reality, the fort really wasn't ready for an all-out assault like this. The Union had no fuses for their explosive shells, so they can only use solid iron balls, which when you're trying to hit earthen batteries, it's going to be pretty hard. They were pretty inaccurate. And about 7 a.m., Captain Abner Doubleday, the fort's second in command, was given the honor of firing the Union's first shot in defense of the fort. He missed, in part because Major Anderson did not use the guns mounted on the highest tier of the fort. They were using the guns on the lower level, where we were near the parade, which didn't really give you the best angle to hit Confederate batteries here. Now, while this is a little unrelated, if you've ever seen the movie Glory, you'd know a little bit about the assault on Fort Wagner. Well, this is Morris Island, and Fort Wagner actually was a little bit farther east of the current day island. The location of the original Fort Wagner was washed away by erosion. But yeah, that is the island that the assault on Fort Wagner took place on. This is definitely one of the coolest fortifications I've ever visited. Literally, right there is the Atlantic Ocean. So this is pretty interesting. Confederates would use howitzers like these, and they would put them on top of the fort to defend against a surprise landing by Union forces. And you can see the example there. That's pretty neat. Again, we're just touching on the incident in January. Morris Island, across the water directly in front of you, was the scene of Civil War's first hostile cannon fire preceding the bombardment of Fort Sumter. By January of 1861, Union troops occupying Fort Sumter were surrounded by Southern defenses, and to reinforce Fort Sumter, President James Buchanan secretly sent an unarmed coastal steamer called Star of the West to Charleston. But news of the mission arrived first, and when the Star of the West appeared, a South Carolina battery opened fire from Morris Island. The outdated guns did little damage, but when the powerful guns from Fort Moultrie fired, the Star of the West retreated. Now, this is, again, one of the many firsts of the American Civil War. On the night of February 17th, 1864, the HL Hunley set out from Sullivan's Island, and it would sink the USS Housatonic, anchored a few miles offshore. A Union lookout spied the suspicious object moving toward the ship and sounded the alarm. But before the ship could move away, an explosion ripped through the Housatonic's wooden hull. And this was the first time that a ship was sank by a submarine during wartime. Now, the Hunley would sink shortly after sinking the USS Housatonic, and there are several theories as to why it sank, but I'll let you do the research and come up with your own opinion on that. Now, we're on the lower level of the fort here, and here's, again, these are your 6.4-inch Parrott rifles. Their main attribute here is this reinforced iron ring around the breech of the cannon. So I believe this is the lower casemate for your technical term. And you can kind of see these gun carriages here and how they traverse. And where they would fire out. Again, this is facing Sullivan's Island here. So I thought this was pretty interesting. So this is a Columbiad, and apparently the Union kind of modified them and pointed them upwards. This 10-inch Columbiad could fire a 128-pound shell on a high arc. During the Confederate bombardment, Union troops in Fort Sumter aimed their Columbiad mortars at Charleston, but never fired them. And again, here's an example of it. It's pretty interesting. So they're taking a weapon and kind of making it into a mortar. Wonder how effective it was. So that was absolutely amazing. Not only is the scenery beautiful, the ferry ride here was very informative, packed full of information, and just to be here at Fort Sumter, especially being a Civil War enthusiast and kind of seeing where things happened and kind of kicked off that horrible and deadly conflict, was a really cool learning experience. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, we'll catch you on the next one.